Hello and welcome back to the channel. LC here, your guide to all things RPG related, and today we'll be discussing 10 tips to help you dominate in the newly released DioField Chronicle. As I was pretty hyped for this game's release, I pre-ordered this game and was able to get the extra days for early access. So at the time of this recording, I've already beaten the game one time on hard difficulty and have been exploring the new game plus for about a day or so. You'll come to find that DioField Chronicle operates quite differently with respect to most other strategy RPG titles. So let's jump into some tips to help you succeed out there. Also, as usual, if you are new here, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming content. I plan on making a few videos for this title, so make sure you drop a comment letting me know what you'd like to see next, and drop a like if you got anything good out of this. Alright, let's jump into it. Starting with number 10, we have understanding movement and positioning. So for some of us strategy RPG players who come from more of a grid-based affair, a la Final Fantasy Tactics or the Fire Emblem series, you'll immediately notice the change of pace of DioField Chronicle and how it impacts the flow of each match. You're able to manually position each unit on the field and move them as you see fit. It reminds me a bit of an MMO or Final Fantasy 12 the way that the movement is handled. You can also move all the units collectively by pressing L2 and moving them to a new location in sequence, so making sure that you have good movement and map awareness will be key in ensuring that you can keep all your units safe at all times and that you aren't taking unnecessary damage out there on the field. As a side note, when you select to move all your units, this will immediately cancel any static actions that your characters may be doing, such as convalescent circle or fantail formation. Keep this in mind before you mash L2 to move your squad. Moving on to tip 9 and 8, this is going to be skills and partner pairing. Now the skill tree and its function in this game are pretty unique for a strategy RPG title, and I suspect this certainly will be divisive. People are either going to love or hate this. I'm kind of indifferent about it. I think it could have been handled differently, but it's whatever. All skills are tied to the current weapon you have equipped, and you have the ability to upgrade the skills for all the units that utilize the same skill set as a collective. This will help you empower certain skills and help you get the edge you need out on the field. Now you would think that traditionally you'd be able to master certain skills and select them as necessary on a whim or even do like a custom loadout. That's not the route that they elected to go on this game, and I think the main reason for that is going to be due to the partner system that you have in this title. You see, when you're in battle, you have 2 characters per slot for a grand total of 8 characters at your disposal at any given time during the match. You'll have access to your partner skills and they will share the same cooldown timer with your point character. Both characters will also receive experience at the conclusion of the battle whether they were directly fielded or not. You can also swap out characters for a maximum of 3 times during battle, although I never once had to do so. It's something that I think it's kind of a nice to have and maybe in a panic situation, but if you're playing the game kind of correctly, you never really have to do that. So for my playthrough and experience, one of the better ideas that I've found is to stack your partners with characters that have skills or weapons that complement each other. For example, if you have a mage that has nothing but offensive magical abilities, you could partner them with a mage that excels in a healing technique, and you have a more fundamentally sound squad on the field. This is just scratching the surface of the skill system, and I'll break this down in depth in a more concise manner in an upcoming video because there's a lot to cover here. Moving on to number 7, we have summons. Now throughout the game, you're given access to a number of summons to use at your disposal. This is managed by the TP gauge in the bottom right hand corner. As you continue your playthrough, you'll be granted a total of 6 playable summons, each with their own cost to summon. For example, the default summon Bahamut only costs 1 TP to summon, and Goldhorn costs 2. So it's up to you to manage your resources and pick summons that best suit your playstyle and current map that you're on. Each summon can be upgraded to enhance your own skills and can definitely be the deciding factors in some difficult battles if they are properly utilized. And rolling into number 6, we have map awareness and fragment usage. Now one thing I really appreciated about DioField Chronicle was it's pretty generous with the amount of fragment drops that you get on each map. I think that they actually adjust this depending on what difficulty you're in. You have blue drops for TP, green drops for HP, and purple drops for EP. So these are typically scattered around the field at random, and they can be used as a quick method to keep your team healthy without needing to use any additional resources or to stop the flow of battle. Try and ensure that you focus on getting at least most of the blue TP fragments on each map, so by the time the boss encounter rolls around, you have enough resources to perform at least 1 summon in battle. It really does become super clutch. I would say more early game than late game. Late game summons are not as, they're not going to really change the pendulum that much. They're more of a nice to have. One thing you also want to take note of is blue chests that are available on certain maps, which contain resources that can be used for crafting. So at the beginning of each match, what you want to do is just pause and kind of scope out and see where the blue chest is and kind of plan your route accordingly to make sure you always are able to get the blue chest. You can always go back and replay maps, so it's not an end all be all, but it's nice to kind of do it while you're already there. And then coming in at number 5 and number 4, we have castle upgrades and side quests. Okay, now I know this topic might initially seem a bit daunting, honestly, with trying to upgrade everything, but once you really get into the flow of it, and with just a smidge of patience, it's actually a bit of a breeze. I managed to complete all the side quests and main quests in this game in under 25 hours. And honestly guys, that's kind of light work in comparison to most RPGs. Okay, so let's start off with the castle. There's 5 different hubs that can be independently upgraded throughout your playthrough that will impact everything from your summons to your weapon skill tree. And here are the following 5 subsections. First, we have the shop rank. This will impact the items that you can get at your shop. The more you upgrade it, the higher end items you can get. And then moving on, we have the orb research rank. This impacts the amount of TP you have access to, so you can get up to like 6 slots. And it also gives you the ability to strengthen each summon, so that's something that's pretty important as well. Then we have the skill tree rank, which allows you to upgrade your skills and allow them to become much more potent. This is something that's pretty critical. I do tend to try and prioritize that as well. And then we also have the weapon development rank, which is pretty straightforward. It allows you to develop weapons, custom weapons, which I'll touch on in a bit later. Then we have the mill rank, which is completely passives. Honestly, the passives that you get from upgrading from rank 1 to rank 5, that can really make or break it. And I found it was worth putting the effort in to try and get all of these to rank 5 because the passives that you get are really noticeable after a while. Now let's talk about how to actually get the upgrades. So after most main quests or intervals that you just completed a main quest, you'll have access to kind of meander around your camp and speak to your teammates. If you see this green icon on your map, that means that there are certain subquests available to you. So what you want to do is head over to the character that has a green scroll over them, speak to them, and then head over to the main war room. You'll see that a subquest is now available. They will be green scrolls on the map. After it's completed, go back and speak to them again to get a reward. And this is one of the better ways to actually gain skill points as well, and the resources that you're going to need for crafting. Now, a quick note, keep in mind that all your match rewards that you get are based off of 2 things. Number 1, not having anybody die, and number 2, completing the map within a certain time interval. If you failed one of these conditions, you can always go back and do this again. So don't think it's the end all be all. Of course, it's better to do it on the first run, but sometimes this is really difficult, honestly. You can always go back and do them again at this section of camp, and the rewards will be the same, so don't stress it if you find that you're not always acing a lot of these missions. Now, leveling up some of these hubs late game will really start to take a toll on the old piggy bank, with some of the tier 4 promotions taking 40k per pop. Now, don't feel rushed to get all these done as soon as possible. They don't need to be done immediately. And late game, you'll actually have a surplus, a real abundance of money. So if you want to hold off on some of these till late game, that's up to you. I would say prioritize what you feel needs to be done to keep you strong on the battlefield and save the rest for later. And moving on to number 3, let's talk about some in-game tactics in battle. And to do this, I want to discuss a bit about team comps. So the first comp that you're given is 2 melee attackers, 1 mage and 1 archer. So this was a typical archetype that I actually used for most of my playthrough. I used the 4 main characters for the majority of the game, and you'll see why later why I didn't. Now, this doesn't mean that this is the best or the most optimal. It's just more of a safer and more balanced approach. You could technically field like all melee or ranged mage comp if you're so inclined to, but just keep in mind, that each comp is going to have its benefits and its drawbacks. And some maps definitely, you can get mauled, right? If they're just running at you and you have triple mage, you're probably going to get bodied. Now, when you're on the battlefield, you typically want to have your point characters directly up front in the fray and have your ranged characters in the back. Being on point typically means that your melee characters obviously are going to be more prone to danger and have higher damage given consistently. So ensure that you're being meticulous with your positioning. And when it comes to overall battles in DioField Chronicle, here's a few bullet points to keep in mind. Number 1, always keep at least 1 to 2 characters that can interrupt AoE charge attacks. Attacks such as stun shot or frostbind are great for this, but are normally much safer because these attacks are being used by your back line. If you see your opponent charging, it'll have a red outline there. Once it completes, they'll unleash a massive attack, and in hard mode, they can one-shot you. So you have to be able to interrupt those attacks. So you want to always have at least 1 character that can do that on the field. And then moving on at number 2, we have using combo attacks to maximize damage. This game has a generous amount of status effects, which can be used in tandem with characters like Rias for absolutely silly levels of damage output. Any character that benefits from using follow-up attacks from status effects is an absolute king in this game. So if you do something like stun shot and then you do assassination, you'll see that he gets criticals or ambush or something like that. He just does a great deal more damage. Also, this comes with positioning. If you position a character like Rias behind a character, you'll notice that they do considerably more damage. So keep that in mind as well. And number 3 on the bullet points is utilizing buffs. This is also a great way to give yourself a bit of an unfair advantage as well. Buffs such as Ignition essentially give you haste for an absurd amount of time. Like when it's mastered, you get haste for a while, and it helps you carve out your enemies with ease, especially if they're kind of tanky and you put haste on all 4 characters. You're definitely gonna slide through them pretty quickly. But as always, make sure you experiment and see what best fits your playstyle. Moving on to number 2, we have weapon selection. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier, the weapons in this game dictate which skills you have access to during battle. This means you'll constantly be faced with decisions with using certain weapons that may be a bit weaker, but have a more robust overall skill selection, or weapons that are just outright a bit stronger, but their skill selection might be a little questionable. So keep that in mind. That's going to be a decision you have to make over and over in this game. Also, one thing you want to be aware of is the current passives that each weapon possess, whether it be like magic or cavalry bane. This will do extra damage to this specific enemy type. So the general shop that the game gives you has access to decent equipment. It's nothing to write home about. It's just okay, honestly, for the first 3 chapters or so. But once you gain access to weapon development, you're going to want to immediately start utilizing these weapons for the remainder of the game. Now, from the beginning, they do cost kind of a pretty penny to unlock and to purchase at the store. However, I always found it was more than worth it in most cases, and that these weapons give a much better ROI in the end. The only exception is some endgame armor that you can get from the shop is actually pretty good, and they come with some hilariously broken passives, so keep that in mind as well. And for the grand finale, we have what is actually a very basic tip, but will save you a metric ton of time. So when in battle, make sure that you are utilizing the double speed option. You can do this by pressing forward 2 times on the analog stick, and you can double the speed of battle. Now, this is not as crazy as like 4 times speed in Final Fantasy 12. And you want to be careful with this because things are happening so fast that your character's health bar can be completely melted really quickly. And if you're in hard mode, I recommend like 1.5 because they can really hit you quite hard, quite quickly, and you're like, oh, I'm dead. So just keep that in mind. And also, when you are in base camp, you can fast travel by pressing R2 to navigate the halls and just kind of teleport around. I played this on a PS5, man, so there was like no loading, and I think that was part of the reason I was able to kind of fix it so fast. And it just kind of made the game kind of a bit of a ease. So I've unlocked pretty much all the weapons and all the skills and stuff like that. So I'll do another breakdown. I am still kind of having a bit of fun with this game. So I think that there's a little bit more to explore. But let me know what you want to see down in the comments. But until next time, LC signing out. Peace.